Chapter 9. Suggestion and Health. Perhaps in no other way is suggestion so commonly accepted by people as in relation to their physical condition, or health. People are being made sick, and others are being made well, every day by suggestion pure and simple. We purpose devoting a number of the chapters of this book to various phases of suggestive therapeutics, but it may be as well, at this point, to call your attention to the undoubted effect of suggestion upon the physiological functions. Science has recognized this fact, and modern medicine takes it into serious consideration. Cults and schools of thought have been built upon this fact, and the underlying principle has been lost sight of by the various theories, explanations, dogmas, and ideas philosophical and theological which have gathered around it. Some of the authorities call it the effect of the imagination upon physical states, or the power of mind over body. But suggestion is the active principle of application in all the various forms, and under all the various names, and in spite of the conflicting theories. That mental states affect physiological function is admitted by the best authorities in medical science, and has been for many years. But it is only of later years that methods of applying the principle have been taught and practiced to any great extent. Previous to that time the principle was mentioned only in connection with the production or induction of disease by adverse mental states. Perhaps a consideration of the older authorities might be interesting and instructive, at this stage, and before we undertake the general subject of suggestive therapeutics. Sir Samuel Baker, in the British and Foreign Medico-Chirurgical Review, said, "Any severe grief or anger is almost certain to be succeeded by fever, in certain parts of Africa." Sir. Suggestion and autosuggestion. B.W. Richardson, said, "Diabetes from sudden mental shock is a true, pure type of a physical malady of mental origin." Sir George Paget, said, "In many cases I have seen reasons for believing that cancer has had its origin in prolonged anxiety." Dr. Murchison said, "I have been surprised how often patients with primary cancer of the liver have traced the cause of this ill health to protracted grief or anxiety. The cases have been far too numerous to be accounted for as mere coincidences." Professor Elmer Gates says, "My experiments show that irascible, malevolent, and depressing emotions generate in the system injurious compounds, some of which are extremely poisonous, also that agreeable, happy emotions generate chemical compounds of nutritious value, which stimulate the cells to manufacture energy." Dr. F. W. Southworth says, "If mental causes can change the various secretions of the body, making them poisonous, for example, the saliva, and the milk in the human breast, under the influence of anger, worry or fear, could it not also be productive of disease through imperfect or non-elimination? Is it improbable that fear, which is a greater negative force than anger, may produce the results as indicated? All of the mental states above mentioned as affording a probable cause of disease can be and are produced by suggestion or autosuggestion. While that mysterious force behind the mental states may escape our definition, unless we consider it to be some phase of the will, nevertheless we may safely assert that in suggestion we find the motive power which calls this force into operation. In the same way, that which people call imagination, is seen to be but a mental picture created in the imaginative regions of the mind by suggestion, and afterward materialized by fear or faith, both of which act in the same general manner. The following interesting quotation from Professor Halleck will show the effect of these suggested mental images, considered as products of the imagination. When a mental image is taken for a reality, the most astonishing results often follow, indeed. Suggestion and health. Sometimes they are more pronounced than if the image were a reality. One may find many illustrations of this in everyday life. Were it not for this power of the imagination, the majority of quack nostrums would disappear. In most cases bread pills, properly labeled, with positive assurances of certain cure accompanying them, would answer the purpose far better than these nostrums, or even much better than a great deal of the medicine administered by regular physicians. There is perhaps not a person living who would not at times be benefited by a bread pill, administered by someone in whom great confidence was reposed. Warts have been charmed away by medicines which could have had only a mental effect. Dr. Tuke gives many cases of patients cured of rheumatism by rubbing them with a certain substance declared to possess magic power. The material in some cases was metal, in others wood, in still others, wax. He also recites the case of a very intelligent officer who had vainly taken powerful remedies to cure cramp in the stomach. Then he was told that on the next attack he would be put under a medicine which was generally believed to be most effective, but which was rarely used. When the cramps came on again, a powder containing 4 grains of ground biscuit was administered every 7 minutes, while the greatest anxiety was expressed, within the hearing of the party, lest too much should be given. Half-dram doses of bismuth had never procured the same relief in less than 3 hours. For 4 successive times did the same kind of attack recur, and 4 times was it met by the same remedy, and with like success. A house surgeon in a French hospital experimented with 100 patients, giving them sugared water. Then, with a great show of fear, he pretended that he had made a mistake and given them an emetic instead of the proper medicine. Dr. Tuke says of this case, the result may easily be anticipated by those who can estimate the influence of the imagination. No fewer than 84/5 were unmistakably sick. Suggestion and autosuggestion. You are familiar with the old cases of people who have been told repeatedly that they were looking very sick, as a practical joke, and who took to their beds with various ailments. Also of the man who thought he was bleeding to death, from hearing the dripping of water accompanying a slight incision made in his arm by surgeons, actual death ensuing from the shock and fright. Many similar cases are related in the annals of medicine. Every professor in a medical college has had numerous experiences in which students took on the symptoms of the various diseases which they had been studying. It has been estimated that as many die from fright during great epidemics, as from the disease itself. We have had the personal assurance of a reputable practitioner of medicine, that he once attended a case in which the patient believed that she had taken a dose of strychnine by mistake. When the physician arrived, the patient was showing all the symptoms of poisoning from strychnine. She had previously witnessed the death of a dog from a similar poison, and only recovered after the usual antidotes and treatments had been administered, as it was she was weak for a long time afterward, notwithstanding the fact that after the doctor had left, the bottle of poison was found untouched, the woman having taken some harmless mixture. Many physicians of long practice relate similar experiences in their own professional life. Fright is a virulent poison, in many cases just as joy is a powerful restorative and invigorant. Dr. George Patton, in a paper read before a medical society in 1900, made the following statements: the mind as a dynamic force exerted over the functions of the body has been, doubtless, operatively manifest from the cradle of our existence. Though the fact may not have been so recognized at this primitive period, it is really the explanation of the cures which were then attributed to the influence of the stars, to divinations, talismans, charms, etc. genus, for in the infancy of our race there were neither doctors nor drugs, the means of cure being wholly mental, aided by the so-called efforts of nature. Herodotus. Suggestion and Health tells us that the Babylonians, Chaldeans, and other nations of antiquity had no other physicians and used no medicines. Even when the practice of healing passed from the east into Egypt, and thence into Greece, it was exclusively confined to the temples. At this period it was the universal belief that all diseases were due to the anger of the gods, and, therefore, prayers, with ceremonies of pomp and mysticism, were used to propitiate heaven in favor of the sick, and all were of such a nature as to act vividly upon the imagination and emotions. Now these measures, in their entirety, were well calculated to arouse a new and favoring action in the nervous centers, and through them a sanative influence over the assimilative and nutritive processes, as well as upon the organic functions. At a later period, when medicine first began to be disseminated from Greece into the outer world, if recovery took place it was accredited wholly to a charm, incantation, amulet, or talisman, which had now, in part, taken the place of the ceremonies in the temple, as the means of cure. Here, again, we see the effects of credulity and superstition exercised through the emotions and imagination upon the ills of the body. At still a later period in the history of medicine, magic and medicine were almost synonymous terms. In fact, the practice of medicine consisted almost wholly of the machinery of magic. A word scrawled upon parchment, for instance, would cure fevers. A hexameter from the Iliad of Homer cured gout, while rheumatism succumbed to a verse from Lamentations. These could be multiplied, and undoubtedly all were equally potent of cure in like manner. The repulsive and ridiculous agents at one time so often and so freely given to the sick could only have been curative through a mental impression transmitted to the body, for who could take a potion from the skull of a murderer, or a tincture made from the common louse, or a pill from the dried liver of a bat, or a powder from the heads and legs of spiders, without profound emotion? Even now, new, unusual and untried remedies are suggestion and autosuggestion, often more efficient than the old and well-tried ones, and the shrewd and knowing doctor often avails himself of this fact. In each and every one of the instances mentioned above, the effect was undoubtedly caused by the power of suggestion, in one or more of its various forms and phases. We shall continue the subject in the next chapter. Chapter X. Mask Suggestion. N. O.T. Only in the ancient days was suggestion, under various disguises, employed to arouse the minds of the people in such a manner that therapeutic benefits were secured, but even in comparatively recent history, yes, even down to the present times, have the same general methods been employed with the same results. History constantly repeats itself, in suggestive therapeutics as in everything else. All through the history of the race for the past 1,000 years, we find numerous instances of the employment of mask suggestion, that is, suggestion wearing the veil of some outward form or belief operating to cure people of disease. We hear countless instances of holy wells, sacred grottos, sacred relics, shrines, and other places associated with various religions, to which have been attributed wonderful cures of physical ailments. Many supposedly incurable cases have been healed at these places, or by these holy objects. The shrines, and wells, and chapels are filled with the crutches of cured cripples, and countless well-attested cases of marvelous cures are reported as having occurred. But similar cures have been recorded throughout all history, accompanying all forms of religions, so that the scientific investigator soon comes to suggestion and autosuggestion. The conclusion that the only virtue in the religious association of the cure consists in the faith and association in the mind of the patient, along the lines of suggestion. The same results are obtained by so many different methods, and under so many different phases of religious belief, both Christian and pagan, that it must be conceded that the real cause lies far back of creed, form, or ceremonial. And suggestion is seen to be the real cause. There is a well-known case related of a sacred bone which obtained great repute in the Middle Ages from its wonderful power to heal diseases. This bone had been brought from the Holy Land by 2 soldiers of the Crusades, and was supposed to be a portion of the skeleton of some great character of the New Testament. It was only upon the death of one of these soldiers, years after, that the truth became known. On his deathbed the soldier confessed that he and his companion, becoming drunk on the journey, had lost the real relic which they were transporting from the Holy Land. Fearing to return home without it, they substituted the bone of a sheep which they found in a field. Much to their surprise, the sheep bone operated as the means of wonderful cures, and they agreed to keep the matter silent. In this case, as in many other of a similar nature, the faith and belief of the people, acting along the lines of suggestion, operated as a dynamic power for producing physiological changes and operations, which resulted in the restoration of health to many a suffering mortal. After the disclosure of the nature of the relic, the cures ceased at once, and many of those who had been healed became sick again. The kings of England and France were formerly believed to possess great healing powers, applied by laying on the hands. This was known as the royal touch and was believed to be specially efficacious in cases of scrofula. Thousands were cured of this and similar diseases, and the gift was never doubted. Wiseman, a noted surgeon of several centuries past, has written of the royal touch, I myself have been an eyewitness of many thousands of cures performed by His Majesty's touch. Mask suggestion. Alone, without the assistance of medicine or surgery, and those, many of them, such as had tired out the endeavors of able surgeons before they came hither. I must needs profess that what I write will little more than show the weakness of our ability when compared with His Majesty's, who cureth more in 1 year than all the surgeons of London have done in an age. The virtue of the royal touch was not doubted, until in the 17th century, when there arose a pretender by the name of Greatrax, who claimed to possess the royal touch, and who healed thousands of people by laying on of hands. So marked was his influence that the throne became worried, for the people were muttering that Greatrax must be the descendant of a former king, and rightful heir to the throne. The Royal Chirurgical Society of London investigated Greatrax and his cures, and made a report stating that his cures arose from some mysterious sanative contagion in his body. Modern students of suggestion give a more scientific explanation. Similar to these cases is that of Elijah Perkins, a Connecticut blacksmith, who invented a set of metallic tractors, which were a tongue-shaped contrivance composed of several kinds of metal. These tractors were applied to the affected portions of the body, and wonderful cures were reported as the result. A great furor arose from the character and number of cures thus made by Perkins, and he founded a school of the healing art which was called Perkinism. New England was set ablaze by the new wonder, and the contagion rapidly spread over the rest of the country. Thence it was carried to England and the continent, with equal success. Schools and hospitals were erected, in which Perkinism was practiced. The records of the time state that over 1 million cures were made in Europe alone. People high and low were treated with more or less success. The bubble was finally punctured by Dr. Haygarth of London, who held that the cures resulted from the imagination rather than from any virtue inherent in the tractors. Accordingly, he proceeded to prove this. Suggestion and autosuggestion. Theory, in the following manner, as reported by a chronicler of the time, he formed pieces of wood into the shape of tractors, and with much assumed pomp and ceremony applied them to a number of sick persons who had been previously prepared to expect something extraordinary. The effects were found to be astonishing. Obstinate pains in the limbs were suddenly cured, joints that had long been immovable were restored to motion, and, in short, except the renewal of lost parts or the change in mechanical structure, nothing seemed beyond their power to accomplish. These results, when explained, punctured the bubble of Perkinism, and the craze subsided. In this case, as in the other, the imagination was simply a form of suggestion along the lines of which we have spoken in preceding chapters. The success of Taoism, and similar religious or semi-religious cults all go to prove the same thing: the existence of some fundamental principle underlying all of these opposing claims, which operates whenever and however it may be invoked. Taoyi undoubtedly cured thousands of people in spite of the crudeness of his methods and creed, and in spite of the ridiculous nature of his claims. And so it is and has been, and will be with other similar cults. They make about the same percentage of cures, because they apply the same fundamental principle of suggestion masked by their various creeds, beliefs, and forms of application. The Emmanuel movement, which is attracting so much attention at this time, employs the same fundamental principle, but unlike its predecessors it frankly acknowledges the nature of that principle, and admits that it is suggestion. The religious atmosphere and influence surrounding these church cures is especially adapted to arousing the feelings of faith, belief, and religious emotion in the patient, and these are among the strongest emotive factors in mental cures, as they serve to bring into operation the dynamic force of the mind of the patient, which tends to restore normal functioning. In fact, we freely admit that many of these cures would not have been accomplished by the methods of the mask suggestion. Ordinary practitioner of suggestion, for the reason that the latter would not have been able to arouse the emotional power of the patient sufficiently. The greater amount of emotive power and expectant attention that the healer is able to arouse in the patient, the better are the chances of a cure. Physicians know the value of the placebo, which is simply a harmless prescription, consisting either of flavored water, or a pill of no medicinal effect, or similar thing. It is the idea of the celebrated bread pill. Every physician knows of many marvelous cures effected by these harmless medicines, the effect depending altogether upon what the physicians formerly called imagination, but which they now know as suggestion. Sir Humphrey Davy once cured a difficult case, by the virtue of the clinical thermometer, which the patient declared made him feel much better the moment it was applied to his mouth. Many patent medicine cures have been made in the same way. The various decoctions formerly sold by the street corner fakirs in the country towns, cured people in the same way. The 1001 appliances and contrivances so extensively advertised in the rural newspapers, depend upon suggestion for their curative virtue. They all make cures and in the same way. Now all this does not mean simply that these imaginary cures are unreal, or cures of imaginary diseases, as so many have assumed. It simply means that they act in the direction of arousing the dynamic latent forces of the mind, along the lines of suggestion. And these mental forces are sufficiently powerful to act and react upon the bodily functions and organs. None of us need to be told of the fact that mental states have a direct effect upon physical functions. Who does not know the effect of fear, grief, or joy on the functions of digestion, assimilation and elimination? The change of a mental state reacts upon the physical system at once. We lose appetite upon the receipt of bad news, but good news makes us feel like enjoying the meal. A disgusting sight, or recollection will produce nausea. The suggestion and autosuggestion. Thought of certain food will cause the saliva to flow, and the gastric juices to be secreted. There is no nonsense, or fanciful imagination about these things are psychophysiological facts, known and taught in textbooks upon the subject. And sane, rational, scientific suggestive therapeutics is based upon this fundamental principle of action and reaction between mind and body, or rather between the brain-mind and the mind in the cells and organs of the body, for it is now known that there is mind in every cell and center of the physical body. In the chapters following the present one, we shall call your attention to both the theory and practice of suggestive therapeutics, as taught by the best authorities of today. It is a subject well worth the careful attention and study of every thinking person. Chapter 11. Suggestive Therapeutics. The term, suggestive therapeutics, has sprung into popular use during the past 10 years, by reason of the fact that suggestion has come to be recognized in regular medical circles as a valuable method of treating many forms of mental and physical disorders. While the term is often used in its narrow significance of treatment by suggestion as suggestion, with the full knowledge on the part of the patient of the underlying principle, still it is properly applicable in all cases of healing or treatment of disease in which the mental activities are brought to bear on the body, by means of masked suggestions, advice, or statements of the various schools of metaphysical healing, including the religious or quasi-religious sects and cults. In this broad sense, suggestive therapeutics today must be recognized as one of the most popular and commonly used methods of treatment of physical disorders. And, brushing aside the fanatical claims and theories of some of the cults, there will be found a solid foundation of fact underlying the various methods employed. Suggestive therapeutics as a science is emerging from the mists and clouds of superstition and fanatical statements and beliefs, and is asserting its right to be considered as any other. Suggestion and autosuggestion. Science on its merits, and with a fair and open mind. This is being recognized by many of the leading minds in and out of the medical profession, although many of the ultra-conservatives still linger in the rear, protesting against the innovation. But constant progress is being made. As Max Eastman says in a recent magazine article, the mission of this paper is to offer guidance in a matter about which a great quantity of the general public is very much at sea. In this question of mind over matter, the reformers have done their work. They have stirred things up. They have bestowed upon the world about 150 little religions and a confused idea that there must be some truth in the matter somewhere. The ignorant have done their work. They have persecuted the believers, jeered at them, or damned them with a vacuous smile. This world will never lack ballast. It is only the scientists that have failed of their duty. They have stalked through a routine of elevated lectures, written a few incomprehensible books, and kept the science of psychology, so far as the hungry world goes, sealed up in their own proud bosoms. In all this uproar of faith cures, and miracles, and shouting prophets, we have heard few illuminating words from the universities. The consequence is that we are without a helm, and the reform blows now one way and now another. The rapid rise of what is known as the Emmanuel movement has served to bring a great number of conservative people to realize that many cures may be made by suggestive therapeutics, pure and simple, under the auspices of church organizations, but without the accessories of fanciful metaphysical beliefs or theories. The fact that these Emmanuel healers are accomplishing the same results, without making the claims of metaphysical schools on the one hand, or the claims of a monopoly of the healing power on the other, has opened the eyes of many people who heretofore have thought that the healing power of the cults was due to some special power not connected with the ordinary natural principles recognized by suggestive therapeutics. Science. The Emmanuel movement is yet in its infancy, and there is room for great improvement in some of its methods, but the honesty of its teachers and healers cannot be questioned, and there has been manifested a steadfast determination to avoid claiming any miraculous powers or monopoly of truth. The rise and popularity of this movement is a hopeful sign, and one that encourages those outside of the movement who have long been interested in the subject of suggestive therapeutics. At the same time, there is to be found, both in this country and abroad, a rapidly growing body of earnest workers among the ranks of the medical profession, who use suggestion in their practice, with excellent results. These men have found that many disorders which were formerly considered as having purely physical causes, really have their roots and causes in mental states and conditions. Consequently, they treat the source of the trouble, instead of the symptoms, with excellent results. And, these men have also found that even in cases of purely physical troubles, the mind may be directed towards strengthening and stimulating the various organs to normal functioning, by means of suggestion. And it is here that the great field for future investigation and experiment opens out to these earnest seekers after truth in their profession. The day for antagonism between the mind-cure people outside of the medical profession, and the practitioners of suggestive therapeutics within the profession, has passed. The era of mutual understanding and cooperation has arrived. We are speaking now of the people, on both sides, who have truth and results as their sole object and aim, but where personal gain is allowed to interfere, there must always be jealousies and friction. In order to give you a fair idea of the general opinion of the medical practitioners of suggestive therapeutics, we ask that you read the following quotation from Max Eastman's magazine article, before referred to. Drive Eastman says, "The law of suggestion, which is one of the great discoveries of modern science, was first formulated by Dr. Leopold at Paris, in a book, Suggestion and Autosuggestion, published in 1866. Since his day, the number of physicians who practice suggestive therapeutics has steadily increased, until today no thorough clinical hospital is without a professional suggestionist. The practice does not involve any metaphysical theories, the passage of any hidden force from one brain to another, any planes of existence, or any religious upset, or any poetic physiology, or the swallowing of any occult doctrines whatever. It is one of the simplest and coolest of scientific theories. It is a question of the relation between the brain and the bodily organs. It seems never to have been clearly stated that healing disease by suggestion depends not in the least degree upon any theory of the relation of mind and matter. The attempt to fix an idea in the mind without reason is suggestion. It is accomplished usually in medical practice by asking the patient to lie down and relax his body and his mind, and then vigorously stating to him the desired idea. It may be accomplished in a number of ways. The patient may be told that the operator is a wizard and is about to transfer an idea from his own mind to that of the patient. If the patient believes him, he will very likely accept the idea. It may be accomplished by gestures or incantations which the patient regards with superstitious awe, provided it is explained beforehand what these gestures are meant to produce. It may be accomplished by telling the patient he has no body, and sitting with him for a while in spiritual silence, provided he knows what to expect. All these methods, if one believes in them, are good, and they prove by their success the law of suggestion. But the method that is based on a sure truth is the method of the scientist. He reasons with his patient, he stirs in him what moral and religious enthusiasm he can, and to these means he adds tactfully the subtle suggestive powers of his own presence and eloquence. This force, together with the power which is revealed in a man of correcting his own mental habits, is the greatest practical discovery of modern psychology. Suggestive therapeutics. Suggestive therapeutics is the use of suggestion to fix in the mind ideas of health, or healthy mental habits. Drive Eastman has well expressed the scientific view of suggestive therapeutics in the above quotation. He calls attention to the fact that while scientific suggestionists recognize the fact that in a number of persons the fanciful appeals to superstition, credulity, and fantastic theories will yield beneficial results, still the tendency and desire is toward educating the patient up to an intelligent understanding of the nature of the principle of cure, and the actual operations thereof. This, of course, should be the aim of every true suggestionist, although personally we can understand the position of some practitioners whose patients are largely recruited from among the ignorant classes, and who would simply mystify and bewilder their patients were they to attempt to explain the scientific principles of suggestion. These practitioners may be excused when they claim that the end justifies the means, and in their position that in the case of the very ignorant patient the best way is to cure him first, and then to explain so far as is possible, afterward. In this spirit there are many physicians who, recognizing a case for suggestive treatment in a patient of this class, consider that the best way to administer that suggestion is by means of colored, flavored, and sweetened water, or other placebo, accompanied by strong, positive repeated suggestions of what the medicine will do for the patient. A placebo administered in this way, a half teaspoonful to be taken every half hour, becomes a most powerful suggestion. In the first place, there is the strong suggestion of authority of the physician, and the suggestion of repetition which is caused by the frequent taking of the dose, each dose being a reminder of the original suggestion. Many cases reached in this way, could not be reached by ordinary suggestion, with a scientific explanation the patient wouldn't understand it at all. In the same way a little trip, or a visit to some celebrated springs or health resort, acts as a strong suggestion, as all physicians know. These things, suggestion and autosuggestion, all have their place, and have their uses and excuses, but the practitioner does not complete his work unless he finally dismisses the patient with a number of good suggestions, and a stock of good advice regarding personal habits, etc., which will tend to prevent a recurrence of the complaint. No work, or chapters, on suggestive therapeutics would be complete without a consideration of the causes of the physical complaints amenable to the suggestive treatment. Therefore in the succeeding chapter we shall consider the same. In this part of the work we shall draw upon the knowledge and experience of some able practitioners, in and out of the medical profession, with whom we have been associated in experimental psychological work, in addition to actual cases which have come under our own personal experience. We shall avoid technical terms so far as is possible, as this book is in no sense of the term to be considered a medical work.